All right, good morning. I'm Sergeant First Class Amadon. I work out at Orchard Range Control as a Senior Range Safety NCO, and I will be giving your safety and conduct of training brief this morning. After I'm complete, Mr. Kennedy is going to go ahead and give your OIC RSO brief, and let's get started. So the agenda, this morning we're going to go over range control mission, responsibilities, and functions, the key personnel out there at range control, unit responsibilities, OCTC, ORTC, and OCA overview, communications, what you do when you enter the OCTC, your movements in and around the OCTC, our general range regulations out there, what to do if there's fires, how to occupy ranges and training areas, and then medevac procedures and any additional information. So range control, we represent the director in all matters pertaining to the control and access of ranges and training areas in the Orchard Combat Training Center. We enforce the rules and regulations in accordance with IDARN 350-12, your AR 38563, and the DA PAM 38563. We assist exercise planners by evaluating all training plans for safety considerations, completeness, and accuracy to mitigate risks. We ensure the safety parameters are followed during live fire maneuver events, and then we schedule all activities out there and then manage the safety net as well. Key personnel, so the names change quite often, the positions and phone numbers don't. If you need to write these down, go ahead. Here's another list of key personnel. These gentlemen usually don't change very often. That's why their names are up there and their phone numbers are all accurate as well. Okay, the unit responsibility. It's your responsibility to watch the TAG's environmental video within 30 days prior to coming out to the OCTC. We also require that your commander sign a memo stating that you have watched the TAG's environmental video, and then you can send that to myself or anybody out at range control and we can put that in your file. Periodically monitor your RFMIS account, usually your training and readiness NCO, your S3s as well, to make sure your RFMIS requests are either being approved by range control, or if there's an issue, you need to check the communications block. Mr. Anderson or our range OIC and NCOIC will put comments in there if they need any kind of documentation or any other information prior to approving your RFMIS request. All right, the Army Safety Program. It reduces accidents, fatalities in order to enhance warfighting readiness, integrate risk management into all garrison and tactical operations, and it's based on 3 elements: your leadership, discipline, and standards, and we'll go over those on the next slide. Your deliberate risk management. All training events must have completed, signed, deliberate risk management worksheet on site. So if you're out there in the training area and you guys are doing maneuver training, you must have a deliberate risk matrix on hand. Same thing with your ranges. That is an inspectable item, and as range control, if we come out there, we're going to want to see your risk management worksheet along with some other inspectable items. So the overall residual risk level signature authority, if it's a low rating, the lieutenant colonel can sign it, or he can delegate that down to his company commanders as well. If it's a medium rating, then it requires a lieutenant colonel signature. A high rating must be a colonel, and then an extremely high rating, the first general officer in the chain of command is the one that has to sign that. Leadership, discipline, and standards. So the 3 most common causes of accidents out there are your human error at 80%, environmental factors covers 15%, and then material or equipment of failure is 5%. At a minimum, all soldiers must receive a safety brief prior to the beginning of each training event from the OIC or RSO, and that's part of your going into a hot status information that we require at range control. You need to let us know that all soldiers on that range received a safety brief. Human factors. So soldiers fail to follow or enforce a standard when he or she knows the standard has been trained to but chooses not to follow it. Leaders fail to enforce established standards when they allow their soldiers not trained, certified on the equipment to conduct the training anyway. Failure to implement a rest plan during continuous operations. The standards are not clear, practical, or do not exist at all. And if no standard exists, then you guys need to establish one. So here's a picture of our OCTC map. You got the core impact area, your dudded impact area, the small area on the west side of the range there, and then your non-dudded impact area is highlighted in that orangish color. Up north in the alpha areas, that's a lot of our maneuver land. Down south in the Charlie areas, you got the dig site down there, your land nav, and then of course your counter ID villages. Support facilities or the orchard cantonment area. If you guys have been out there recently, you'll notice that it's being built up, and it's still being built up as we speak. So there's a lot of new facilities and buildings going on out there. Okay, your ground guide areas. If you guys are in a Humvee and you're in the cantonment area, you do not need a ground guide. However, if you're anything bigger than a Humvee, we require that you have a ground guide in front of that vehicle at all times while it's traveling. If the SPC out there or range control personnel catch you, then they're going to pull you over, and you'll have to deal with the consequences at that point. So ensure that if you have a vehicle that's bigger than a Humvee, that you do have a ground guide in the cantonment area. All right, if you need to contact range control during operations conducted out there north of south of Cattle Guard, the fire desk is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can either get us on FM comms, single channel plain text 46950, and our call sign is Orchard Range Control. If you don't have FM comms, then you can give us a call on landline 208-272-4444. If for whatever reason we're not there, we will have our phones forwarded to the Security Operations Center. So you will reach somebody regardless if you're on the radio or phone. And Security Operations call sign is 87 Sierra. And again, you can reach them on the FM frequency, or you can call the 444 number or 7711, and you will talk to somebody. Okay, communications. You must monitor the safety net 46950 at all times. If we need to call you for some reason, we can't get a hold of you, we got to send somebody out, then that's a good way to get your range or training area shut down until we get the issue resolved. Communicate in the clear at all times. The only communications to or from range control are allowed on the safety net. Do not use internal communications on our safety net. Do not try to get a hold of one of your sister companies or a Humvee or whatever you're trying to on our safety net. Make sure you use your internal freaks for that. The safety net is recorded along with our phones, so whenever you're talking to us or we're talking to you, that's being recorded on one of our computers. So ensure you're using professional language when talking to us, and we do the same for you. Do not use Hollywood call signs. If you're going to occupy a range or training area, and you're trying to get a hold of range control, just give us your unit name and where you're headed. Don't use your Hollywood call signs. Again, failure to maintain prescribed communications with us or 87 Sierra jeopardizes your continued training in the OCTC. Okay, when you enter the OCTC, primary way to get a hold of us is FM comms. If that doesn't work, use your cell phone. Give us a call at 272-4444. The info we need from you is the number of vehicles, the number of personnel, the location you're entering from, which is Pleasant Valley, Orchard Access, or Cinder Cone, and then let us know where your final destination is, which range or which training area you're headed to. Your movement within the OCTC, your speed limits, all tracked and wheeled vehicles above 2.5 tons is 25 miles per hour. Anything below 2.5 tons is 35 miles per hour. Off-road maneuver will not exceed 25 miles per hour, but more than likely will be less than that due to dust or visibility limitations. Your non-standard driving conditions, safe speed determined by unit command and risk assessment. So your NVG, your driver's training, that type of stuff, that'll be based off your convoy commander or your company commander. While you're on Range Road, Orchard Access Road, Pleasant Valley Road, or Cinder Butte Road, you must have your white lights on at all times. There's no exceptions to that. You cannot do your NVG night driver's training on any of those roads, so there should be no issue with keeping your white lights on at all times. New requirement that we implemented is at least one vehicle in each convoy must be monitoring 46950 at all times. Reason being is if it's dusty out there, you guys have a large convoy, the fire department needs to go to a vehicle accident or a fire downrange or something, we can't be tying those guys up. So that way, If you guys are in your convoy, we need to get a hold of you to tell you to pull over so the fire trucks can get around you. That's why we're requiring one vehicle at a minimum monitored 46950. POVs are not authorized in the OCTC, period. If you need to get a range pass for rental vehicles, you can stop by Range Control. We'll sign those out for you. And then just make sure you turn them back in when you're done. Here's your speed limit chart. Off-limits areas. Most areas are marked with signs, white reflective posts, or are fenced off. Some of these areas include your cultural areas, your weather stations, research sites, and safety zones. This is a hot topic. If you guys don't know yet, the tag is all over these off-limits areas. We spent a lot of money over the last year and a half getting most of our off-limits areas fenced off. So they're pretty easy to recognize now. The only issue we have is with the Russian thistle. It's stacking up against the fenced off areas. So make sure you're paying attention when you guys are out doing maneuvers and that type of stuff. If you want to stop by Range Control, we can link you up with ITAM personnel. They can take you out to the off-limits areas of where you're going to be training. They'll ensure that the maneuver control officer knows where those locations are and keeps your training away from those areas. The area surrounding the ASP is off-limits, always has been, always will be. Some other examples here, your species protections. If slick spot peppergrass is spotted out there, then it'll be fenced off, marked off. You guys need to stay away from that. And then, of course, the dry lake beds on the west side have always been off-limits as well. Here's some examples of those new fences and posts put up. And then on your maps, you'll see the off-limits area symbol and then a restricted use area symbol. Back in 2014, here's an example of what happened back then during an XCTC. Somebody drove right through one of the dry lake beds, the Flamingo Lake in the Charlie 4 area. And then here's another one that happened in the same time frame. This site here was encircled by rocks and reflective markers, but the unit that was out there training decided to go ahead and drive through that anyway. Additional movement conditions for tanks and fighting vehicles with a turret and gun tube barrel. Your barrel must be locked over the front slope or the rear deck of the vehicle that you're in. Make sure that gun barrel is elevated to maximum height. Do not scan while traveling on Range Road, Orchard Access, Pleasant Valley, or Cinder Butte. That is a safety hazard. Tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles have the right-of-way on all those main roads, so if you're in a Humvee and you see a tank coming, make sure you're the one that pulls off to the side. Blackout driving is not permitted in the OCA on Pleasant Valley Tank Trail, Orchard Access, Cinder Butte, or Range Road, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, check on learning. What is the maximum speed limit for off-road travel? Name 3 types of restricted areas and how are they depicted on the map? Service drive lights, your white lights must be on at all times on what roads? All right. General range regulations. At a minimum, Kevlar helmet, hearing protection, and eye protection will be worn when forward of the tower on a live fire range while it is in a hot or check fire status. If you guys are mandated to wear more than that, then that's on your unit. That's all we require as far as range control. Units will follow the personnel protective equipment requirements of DA PAM 38563, and you can find that in Chapter 2, Table 2-2. The live fire shoot house has unique restrictions and its own SOPs. Currently, that is unavailable until we get the new SOPs approved and our SDZ deviations as well. Lasers are considered a live fire weapon system, so if you plan on using lasers but not shooting live rounds, you still need to call range control and request to go into a hot status. Make sure your range fan markers are illuminated for night gunnery with a device suitable for optic being used, so thermals, your red light, etc. Fire reporting and prevention. If you guys have a fire out on one of your ranges or training areas, make sure you notify range control immediately, either on 46950 or give us a call on the landline. If there's a fire on inside or outside a range road, we still need to know about it so we can get the fire department dispatched out there. The faster you report it, the faster it can be put out and the quicker you can be returned to your training. Make sure you're only smoking in the authorized areas on each range. We went out there a couple years ago and put up smoking area signs, so that's the only designated smoking areas on each range. If you want to use pyro, you got to get that authorized through range control every 24 hours. So either call the range OIC or the range ins OIC, and they can approve or deny that. You will not assist the firefighting elements unless you are directed to do so. Just stay out of their way and let them take care of it. Ensure your fire extinguishers are serviceable. Keep doors closed in the barracks and other buildings. Quite often the SPs or the fire department will patrol around those barracks there at the ORTC, and if they see the doors open, then they'll let us know, or they'll come find your command and let you know to keep those doors closed. No campfires, of course. If possible, order your non-tracer ammunition for the months of May through September to help mitigate the fire risk out there. Of course, if you do have a fire, it costs money. You lose your training time. Training areas, depending on how bad the fire gets, can be closed off for quite some time to rehab. Pyro, we talked about that. You have to get approval by range control 24 hours in advance prior to using it. Okay, to request occupied status for ranges and TAs, you need to call range control via landline or FM and request to occupy. At that point, you need to maintain your communications at all times with range control. When you're in an occupied status, you do have to do radio checks every 3 hours at the top of each cardinal hour, which is noon, 1500, 1800, 2100, so on and so forth. Vehicles are restricted to the established roads and centered areas on all ranges and TTBs. The hutments, so on any range that has a hutment minus ranges 14 north and south, you have to request to use those buildings. If you did not request them through RIFMIS, then you need to stay out of them. Reason being is because of the hantavirus. If you haven't requested them, we're not going to go out and spray those buildings out with bleach water to make sure we kill the hantavirus. However, like I was talking on 14 north and south, once you request those ranges, you automatically get the two hutments, the new hutments they built out there, and we'll go out there and spray them out. So do not eat or store any type of food in those hutments. It's a attractant for the mouse. Request permission from range control to go down range. So if you need to go down and set up targets, or if you're going down to do a downrange sweep, you need to call range control and let us know how many VICs, how many packs, and how far downrange you're going. If you're doing a downrange sweep, ensure you're going to maximum range of the weapon system to do that downrange sweep. Maximum effective range doesn't work, so make sure you give all that information to us, and then we can either approve or deny it depending on what's happening on adjacent range. Okay, your air and ground medevacs. Units will contact range control via FM 46950 to initiate all medevac requests, whether it's a ground or air. And then you guys are responsible to monitor the net for the duration of that medevac. We've had problems with units doing a ground evac on their own and not notifying range control or letting us know hours after it happens. And that's unacceptable. We need to be one of the first people to know, so we can either push out the fire department's EMTs or get that air medevac going. So make sure you call range control immediately to notify us of a medevac. The on-site medic has an overall decision to request either an air medevac or if they're just going to do a unit level evac, or if you guys need an ambulance to come from Ada County. If FM communications cannot be established, make sure you call us on the landline to request one of those medevacs. All hot ranges will go into an immediate check fire during an air medevac. That's one of the big reasons we got to be able to maintain communications with you at all times. And then make sure you utilize the OCTC modified 8-line medevac for requests. And we'll go through those here in just a second. So the modified 8-line air medevac request, we need to know number of casualties and gender, their age, the name of the casualties, a brief description of the condition, their last four, the pickup location, your LZ marking method, and then the unit POC on the ground and phone number, usually the OIC RSO, company commander, and then also the medic that's treating the patient. All right, another check on learning. True or false, ranges must be in a hot status if only conducting lasing operations. True or false, when a wildfire is observed downrange, it is better to wait and see if the fire burns out on its own. And true or false, while in an occupied status, you complete your first 3-hour radio check. Is it okay to turn down the volume now so you can hear other radio traffic better? Okay, road guard duties. When the range SDZ extends over range road, units are required to road guard checkpoints while in a hot or check fire status. So usually the range NCOIC will push out the SDZ to either your master gunners, your S3, or the specific unit that's using the range. If there are road guard locations on that, you must have road guards there at all times. It's a good idea for an NCO to ensure those road guards are in the correct locations. We had an instance last year of a unit firing on range 1, and they had their road guards about 200 meters inside the SDZ, which is a huge safety issue. No military traffic allowed when the range is in a hot status, no exception unless authorized by the OIC RSO. Civilian traffic. The military is not authorized to restrict civilian traffic on range road. Range must be placed in a check fire status prior to civilian traffic passing through. So what we're saying there is if a civilian wants to come through your checkpoint while your range is into a hot status, you have to hold them there until you get a hold of your OIC and they get that range put into a check fire. Once that's verified that the range is check fired, then you can let that civilian go through. You cannot tell that civilian, no, he is not allowed to go through there. Additional instructions. Military interaction with civilians. Make sure you're being professional with the civilians at all times. We have had issues out there where the civilians start getting a little bit of an attitude. If that happens, let range control know and we'll get a hold of 87 Sierra and push somebody out there. But make sure you're being professional with civilian public at all times. Alcohol will not be consumed or stored at the OCTC without prior approval of the Adjutant General. All those alcohol requests must be submitted by the unit leadership to the OCTC Director to the Adjutant General. The radio antennas on vehicles will be tied down when operating in the vicinity of power lines or when the ORC issues a warning of possible lightning activity. Your UXOs, duds, and misfires. Practice the 3 R's, which is recognize, retreat, and report. Your recognize is note the location, give us a grid at range control, and mark the UXO 3 to 5 feet away if possible. Your retreat, of course, is move away from the suspected UXO, and then report. Let range control know the grid location, what you guys marked it with, and preferably leave somebody there that knows where the UXO is at until we link up with you, and then we can get a UOD out there to take care of the UXO. If you have a round that goes downrange but did not function, do not handle, kick, or run over any duds downrange. All duds must be reported to range control immediately. That way, again, we can get EOD out there to clear that dud. If your round did not go downrange, misfires will be reported after immediate and remedial action fails to correct the misfire. Units will not touch, move, or disturb any firing data or debris from the site until range control directs them to do so. Here's some examples of UXOs we found out there. Okay, check on learning once again. Name the 3 R's. Remember when dealing with UXOs. If road guards are required, the position must be manned in what 2 range statuses? And then how is a hantavirus transmitted? Okay, most frequent offenses we see out there is driving too fast, you're going over the speed limits that are posted, not wearing the proper PPE, driving without white lights, it's a big one out there, following too close to other vehicles, lack of communication with range control fire desks, not conducting your downrange sweep or to the required distance, and not reporting incidents or accidents. In summary, safety is always embedded with training. Follow all safety warning cautions and notes in your manuals. Use and follow all procedures in your TMs and your SOPs. Set standards for safety in your unit. Leaders need to be involved. Make sure you're supervising. Practice safety drills repeatedly. Be aware of your surroundings. Constantly update your risk assessments, and then do not ever cut corners when it comes to safety. And that concludes my brief.
Hello everyone, Mr. Kennedy. I work for ORSHA Range Patrol. I work directly for the Range Safety Officer and the Range NCOIC. Today I am going to give you your Officer in Charge Range Safety Officer certification briefing. After this brief, take it, there will be a test at the end. Today, we're going to go over the agenda. It is the purpose, required references, all deliberate risk management worksheet, the unit responsibility, the OIC qualifications and duties, the RSO qualifications and duties, and as well as the MCO, DZSO, and LRSO duties if they pertain to you. We'll go over occupy, hot status, check fire status, going cold, and clearing off the range. We'll go over medical, our class 3, class 5, and airspace as well. There might be a few repetitive things after my coworker, Sergeant First Class Amidon, went over, but bear with me, please. The purpose of this is to provide basic information regarding the conduct of the range and training area operations within the Orchard Combat Training Center to personnel selected to perform the duties of the officer in charge, OIC, range safety officer, RSO, and the movement control officer, MCO. Required references, as stated, AR 385-63 is range safety, DA-PAM 385-63, range safety, DA-PAM 385-64, ammunition and explosive safety standards. IDARM 350-12 is policies and procedures for the Orchard Combat Training Center. ETP 4-35.1, techniques for munition handlers. And all technical manuals for weapons and munitions to be fired must be on that range. All doctrinal field manuals applicable to the training event. If applicable, approved copy of live fire scenario and surface danger zone, which is your SDZ, overlay for your event as well. Please contact Orchard Range Shoal no later than 30 days prior to ensure your surface danger zone SDZ overlay is complete. Right, your deliberate risk management sheet. All training events must be completed with the signed deliberate risk assessment worksheet. This is your DD 2977 on site. The event draw covers the entire event and is completed in IAW ATP 5-9 Risk Management Chapter 1. The overall risk level signature authority is as follows. A low rating can be delegated by a lieutenant colonel to subordinates for signature. If it's a medium rating, it requires a lieutenant colonel signature. If it's a high rating, it requires a colonel signature. And if it's extremely high rating, it's going to require the first general officer in the chain of command's signature. So the unit's responsibility. Your responsibility, first off, is to watch the TAGS environmental video and attend the safety and conduct of training brief, which requires all personnel prior to entering the Orchard Combat Training Center. You also need to receive the annual OIC RSO MCO safety brief and certification class and pass the exam at the end of this brief. Verify the RSO and OIC meet the requirements which are specified in DA-PAM 385-63. The battalion commander or the first 05 in the chain of command must submit an OIC RSO certification memorandum to Orchard Range Shoal no later than 30 days prior to the training event. Once this is received, that is valid for a 12-month period. Officers and NCOs who do not appear on the unit certification memo may not perform OIC and RSO duties. Training certification requirements. Commanders are responsible to ensure individuals are weapon system certified. The OIC must be weapon system certified, and the RSO must be weapon system qualified. And they both have been completed. All training IAW applicable to the TMs, ARs, and TCs, IDARM 350-12, Chapter 3-2, and AR 385-63, chapters 1 through 9. Verify in RIFMIS prior to the unit's occupation that you have a reserve status with the correct dates, times, dodics, weapons, and vehicles. As you see here on this chart, the OIC and RSO requirements are different for all different ammunitions and weapon systems, and only certain positions can be filled by E5 and above. OIC qualifications. An OIC can be a commissioned, warrant, or non-commissioned officer, staff non-commissioned officer, or civilians. The weapon system certified, the OIC must be knowledgeable of the weapon system and laser if used. He must be competent and properly instructed in the performance of their duties. He must be knowledgeable or qualified in the weapon system for which they are held responsible, to include safe ammunition handling and procedures. The OIC must hold responsibility and accountability for the conduct of the activity and adherence to governing regulations and guidance on that range. The OIC must have satisfactorily completed a range safety certification program as determined by the commander of the unit, and receive a range safety brief and pass the associated written test. OIC duties continued. The OIC will have no other assigned duties other than being the OIC of the range. The OIC will stay in the tower at all times while in a hot status and firing. The OIC ensures the overall safety, conduct, and training and proper use of the installation training complex. He will receive a range safety brief prior from installation range control personnel. Ensure the unit using is on the correct range, firing points, and firing areas as assigned by the range control officer, and has the weapons and ammunition approved for that range. Ensure the RSO, the range safety officer, is physically present on the training site. The OIC also must determine when it is safe to fire in accordance with all applicable regulations and installation range requirements. He ensures he receives final clearance from Orchard Range Control, ensures proper supervision of personnel performing misfires, hang fires, and cook-off procedures, ensures required communication is established and maintained at all times with the Orchard Range Control, ensures adequate medical support is available on site, ensures the ammunition and explosives are properly handled, transported, stored, and accounted for within the training complex for the time they receive them to the time of turn-in. OIC duties continued. OIC must ensure a written log, a DA Form 1594, is maintained for safety and control data concerning the operation of the firing range, weapons training facilities, and maneuver areas, authorized operating times, impact area entries and exits, and ceasefire authorizations. Now, the OIC does not have to do the DA 1594 by himself. He can have a recorder or someone else fill that out for him. The OIC must ensure plans for firing exercises and maneuvers are coordinated with range control. He ensures the control of the target area to prohibit entry from unauthorized personnel going down his range. He ensures all ammunition malfunctions and incidents are reported to range control in accordance with AR 75-1 and DA PAM 385-40 for Army, MCO PAPA 5102 1 Bravo, and MCO 8025.1 Echo for the Marine Corps. Ensure coordination and approval has been gained from range control agency for all civilians and contractors, personnel that will be entering the training site. The OIC will brief the RSO on the duties to be performed in support of the training event. He will clearly establish that all requirements for the RSO to brief the OIC on the safety and the facilities and the unit and the readiness to commence live fire operations prior to the start of firing. The OIC will ensure safe laser operations. The laser is a live fire weapon. You must be in a hot status while firing lasers. And the OIC will implement risk management in all phases of the training event. RSO, Range Safety Officer. His qualifications. First off, he can be a commissioned officer, a warrant officer, or a civilian. Personnel assigned as an RSO will have no other duties during that period of training, except for aviation weapon system training, where the instructor pilot may assume the RSO duties in the aircraft. Assistant Range Safety Officer, ARSO, may be appointed as required. The RSO must be weapon system qualified, where the OIC must be weapon system certified. The RSO receives a range safety brief and passes the associated test, same as the OIC. And the RSO must be physically present at the training site at all times. The RSO duties. Receives the range safety brief from installation range control personnel. He ensures that the unit is on the correct range, at the correct firing points, or firing area assigned by range control. The RSO ensures that the weapons and personnel are properly positioned, ensures the authorized ammunition and explosives to include proper charge, fuses, and fuse settings are being used, ensures the firing settings and weapon systems are within prescribed safety limits and are verified. He will verify that the SDZ, Surface Danger Zone, is clear of all unauthorized personnel, equipment, livestock, and wildlife. He will ensure the proper hearing protection is worn by personnel within noise hazard area. He will ensure the proper eye protection is worn by personnel within eye hazard areas. He will verify permission has been received from Orchard Range Control to commence training and live fire operations. RSO duties continued. Ensures compliance with all local SOPs. Orders immediate check fire or check fire when any unsafe act or condition occurs. Prior to commencing live fire operations, he will conduct final coordination with the OIC. This coordination will include a summary of checks, inspections, and actions that the RSO has completed, verification that the required communication has been established, and that a hot status has been received from Orchard Range Control. The RSO will give a safety brief to all personnel present on the range prior to going into a hot status. RSO will report all accidents and ammunition malfunctions to the range OIC. He will verify upon completion of the firing and firing orders to the OIC that all weapon systems are clear and safe before allowing the removal of any weapons from the firing area or firing line. The Maneuver Control Officer, your MCO, is required when operating outside of established roads, TTBs, and ranges. Understand the limitations of the specific training area. Understands the location and markings of the off-limit areas. Understands the environmental, civil, and cultural considerations in the maneuver area. Ensures the unit has control measures in place, whether it is BFT or overlays. Brief the units and crews that are maneuvering on the restrictions and control measures set in place. The MCO must be approved by the battalion commander and he must be an E7 or above. Drop Zone Safety Officer. This is your DZSO. DZSO is appointed by the training unit's battalion commander and will fulfill all responsibilities in TC 3-21 220 and AFI 13-217. Prior to authorization of any drop zones, DZs, coordination and opening and closing time with Orchard Range Stroll must be established 1 hour prior and maintain FM communication with Orchard Range Stroll during all active airborne operations utilizing a DZ. When requesting to open a DZ, report the following: name, rank, and the unit of the DZSO. DZ name that you will be jumping on, the type of aircraft, number of aircraft, number of passes that aircraft will be taking, the number of airdrops, and if it is equipment or personnel. The DZSO must prevent vehicles other than those required for control purposes from entering the DZ. Immediately preceding or during a parachute drop. Ambulances will be permitted in the DZ after all parachutes have landed. Be responsible for spectators and have a control measure in the immediate vicinity of the DZ. At the completion of the activity, close the DZ by giving Orchard Range Stroll a call and request information prior to discontinuing communications with range control. The DZSO is responsible for policing the DZ and spectator area and removing all aerial delivery system material, samples, platforms, bundles, webbing, trash, etc., prior to being cleared by the DZ by Orchard Range Control. Your Laser Range Safety Officer, LRSO. Lasers are considered a live fire weapon. A range must be in a hot status to use them. This is applicable to all laser equipment, weapon systems, or devices used in the Orchard Combat Training Center, regardless of laser type classification. OCTC requirements for Class 3 Bravo and 4 laser use. All units conducting laser training at the OCTC with Class 3 Bravo or Class 4 lasers will meet the requirements listed below. Follow all OCTC laser requirements as outlined in IDARM 350-12, which is in Chapter 11. All training areas or ranges from which a laser originates, passes through, or terminates must be requested in RIFMIS by the unit. A command certified laser range safety officer, the LRSO, must be present on the range during any laser training event. No later than 90 days prior to a planned event, the unit must submit a target scenario worksheet, and a red flag must be displayed while lasing, even if no ammunition is to be fired on that range. Laser Range Safety Officer continued. Max height for lasing targets is the top of the approved target, which is in your target worksheet. Vehicle commanders, the VCs, track commanders, TCs, and the pilots are responsible to ensure proper laser procedures are followed on their vehicle and aircraft. All lasing will cease if communication is lost with Orchard Range Stroll. With the OIC or Orchard Range Stroll. Laser system equipment, vehicles traveling on tank trails, range road, or in training areas will do so with the laser switch safety shield in place. Vehicle-mounted laser devices will not be operated or serviced when removed from the vehicle unless specifically authorized by the appropriate maintenance technical manual. Lasers will only be fired into target areas which are free of reflective, specular, mirror-like surfaces. During lasing, the target area will not be viewed using binoculars, or other optics that are not designated to filter laser radiation from the eye specified in the laser system being used. Lasing will cease immediately whenever positive control of the laser beam is lost. Anyone observing an unsafe act or situation will immediately call a ceasefire. Lasing will not resume until the LRSO has investigated the situation and declared it safe to fire. General range regulations. At a minimum, Kevlar helmet, hearing protection, and eye protection will be worn when forward of the tower on a live fire range, while in a hot or check fire status. Now this pertains to Orchard Range Troll. If your unit commander wants to have further requirements, that's up to him. Units will follow the Personal Protective Equipment requirement in DAPAM 385-63, Chapter 2, Table 2-2. The Live Fire Shoot House, LFSH, has unique restrictions and its own SOP. Units using this facility must coordinate with Orchard Range Troll prior to use. Smoking is only authorized in designated areas, on all ranges, TTBs. Lasers are considered a live fire weapon, must be in a hot status to use. Range fan markers must be illuminated for night gunnery with a device suitable for the optics being used, whether it is thermal or red light, etc. The use of pyro munitions must be authorized or range troll on a daily basis. Doing a downrange sweep. You'll contact Orchard Range Troll on 46950, which is channel 10 in the towers on the radios, and request permission to do a downrange sweep. Only Orchard Range Troll can give you permission to do a downrange sweep. You'll report the number of vehicles, personnel, and how far downrange you will be going. The RSO will visually clear downrange area depicted in the approved SDZ diagram to the maximum range of the weapon system being deployed. That is to include the dead space presented within the SDZ. I say maximum range, not max effective. Make sure you ensure you are clearing down to the maximum range of that weapon system. This must be conducted prior to any live fire exercise. The core impact area, dudded, is off limits to all personnel. If your SDZ goes up to that and past that point, we will have you visually clear further. The RSO, when he does his downrange sweep, he will verify there are no personnel, equipment, cattle are within the SDZ and no reflective material is downrange for laser operations. Only the approved target scenarios will be placed downrange. Unexploded ordnance, UXO, and procedures. Take the following steps for all suspected unexploded ordnance that are discovered. Leave all UXO untouched and in place, including rounds observed striking the impact area but failing to detonate. Move all personnel to a safe distance away from the UXO. Report the following information to Orchard Range Control: the type and size of the UXO if known, location by grid coordinate, the name, rank, unit, and contact information of the individual that reported the UXO, artillery or mortar units which fire an unobserved round will report the plotted location where the round should have impacted. For UXOs discovered outside the impact area, the unit personnel will secure the site until Orchard Range Troll or EOD personnel arrive or until authorized to leave by Orchard Range Control. If directed by Orchard Range Control to do so, please mark the UXO area. Here's a few SDZs drawn on the map here, which are inside the impact area and core impact area, and on the west side of the range here, this SDZ does protrude outside of the impact area. Okay, requesting occupied status. You show up at a range, first thing you need to do is request occupied status. You give Orchard Range Patrol a call on 46950. All vehicles occupying that range must stay in the centered areas and roads. The OCTC hutments, if you do not request hutments in RIFMAS, stay out of them. On ranges 14, those hutments come with the range. Eating and storing of food is not permitted in the hutments. While in an occupied status, you will conduct hourly radar checks with Orchard Range Patrol every 3 hours on top of the hour. So these are your cardinal hours, your 12, 1500s, and so on. Okay, after you've occupied the range and you're requesting to go into hot status, we will ask for the visibility requirements for aircraft. Will be a minimum of 3 statute miles of visibility is needed to operate in the OCTC. Minimum ceiling range firing is clear of clouds. Minimum in-route altitude away from the popular area is 500-foot AGL, that's above ground level. Weapon systems to be rendered inoperable to and from GF and OCTC. 1,000 meters stand off from range 1 tower. For ground, to fire on range during periods of limited visibility, the left and right range fan markers must be identified, and the furthest target needs to be visible using the unaided eye to conduct live fire. The range has been prepared in accordance with approved scenarios from Orchard Range Patrol. A copy of the approved scenario and surface danger zone, your SDZ, are required to be on the range prior to any live fire event. That is up to the RSO and OIC to have those in the tower. If road guards are needed, as in the last slide I showed where the SDZ protruded outside of range road guard location are approved location from Orchard Range Control. Reflective vest and flashlights are required for night operations for those road guards. TMs for employed weapon systems will be on site with that OIC and RSO. And all vehicles are displaying proper vehicle flags or lights. Question on hot status. You call Orchard Range Patrol, we're going to ask you for some information. This information is going to consist of the OIC's last name, his rank, and the last 4 of his social security number. The RSO's last name, rank, and last 4 of his social. The weapon system, tables, and scenarios that will be fired on that range. Ammunition dodics that will be fired. We will ask him to verify that the safety brief has been given to all personnel participating on that range. We'll ask him if a red range flag is flying during the day and a red beacon flag is illuminated at night. We'll ask him if a downrange sweep has been complete to the max range of that weapon system. We'll verify all personnel equipment have returned from downrange. And we'll ask him if a medic is on site with approved dedicated emergency vehicle. And while in that hot status, you will conduct hourly radio checks or transtional at the top each hour. So while in a hot status, ensure you're making radio checks every hour. Okay, requesting a check fire. Reasons to request a check fire. There's a fire down range. There's a safety violation that happened on the range. A breach of airspace. If you see a helicopter or a fixed wing aircraft come into your range, that's immediate check fire. Target maintenance. Environmental considerations. SDZ violations. We've had cattle that come through SDZs. Call in and ask us and we'll put you in immediate check fire. And if there is a medevac. Check fire may be initiated by the unit or Orchard Range Control. While the unit requests check fire, state your reason for that check fire. If you need to change your OIC RSO personnel, a check fire is not needed. Check fire or fire down range. Check fire as soon as possible. Notify Orchard Range Patrol by 46950. Verify all weapon systems have been cleared and elevated and proper vehicle markings are displayed. Notify Orchard Range Control that all systems have been cleared. Orchard Range Patrol will dispatch fire crews downrange, and the net will be monitored at all times. The range OIC will not dispatch fire crews or any soldiers on that range downrange to fight fires. Units will only assist fires if directed by Orchard Range Patrol personnel, and that may be only to protect range infrastructure. All fires in the OCTC must be properly documented on your DA 1594, which is in the Range Tower book. Check fire for a safety violation. The entire range will be put in a check fire status immediately. The weapon platform responsible for the violation will go into a ceasefire freeze. The weapon will not be moved until Orchard Range Patrol personnel have completed their investigation. All personnel will immediately cease fire and move to the rear of that weapon system. All settings on that weapon system, as it was fired, must be left alone until checked by an investigating officer assigned by Range Control. A report of the incident will immediately be made to Orchard Range Patrol. The ceasefire will remain in effect till lifted by the Orchard Combat Training Center Director. Orchard Range Patrol will notify the range officer upon receiving any reports identifying rounds impacting outside the boundaries of Range Road. And at any time that Orchard Range Patrol personnel identify any unsafe acts in the maneuver areas or ranges, the unit will be placed in a check fire status until Orchard Range Patrol personnel feel that the problem has been corrected. So ensure you're doing the right thing when our inspectors come around the ranges. We won't have to take up your time. Medical requirements. In no time will a range be operated with at least one medically qualified person present on that range. All units conducting field training exercises and or firing in the OCTC are required to have the following: a qualified military or civilian healthcare professional, that can be an EMT, paramedic, a doctor, a nurse, physician assistant, a medic, or a combat lifesaver. Current basic cardiac life support certification. A combat lifesaver will only be used when all other options are unavailable and with the prior approval from Orchard Range Control, which this approval has to come from the range safety officer. Medical requirements continued. You must have a litter-bearing vehicle, capable medical vac, and a strip map to get to the nearest hospital. This vehicle must maintain communication with Orchard Range Patrol by FM comms 46950 or cell phone. Medical requirements as well needs to be a litter with 2 blankets and straps, an aid bag with supplies capable of treating emergency field casualties. Air and ground medevacs. Units will contact Orchard Range Patrol by FM 46950 to initiate all medevac requests and monitor the net for the duration of that medevac. The on-site medic has the overall decision to request an air medevac or life flight. Air medevacs will be used for life, limb, or eyesight emergencies. All personnel transported by ground or air must be reported to Orchard Range Patrol. If FM communication cannot be established, use a cell phone or other means. Call 208-272-4444. That will be manned at all times when units are training. All ranges will go into immediate check fire during an air medevac anywhere in the Orchard Combat Training Center, utilizing the OCTC modified 8-line medevac request. As follows: number 1, number of casualties and gender of the patient, casualty age, the name of the casualty, brief description of the casualty's conditions, last 4 of their social security number, the pickup location, whether it is a grid, a range, or lat long, we can convert either or, LZ marking method, and last we have the unit, the POC on the ground, and a phone number for that personnel that is going along with that injured soldier. Closing down the range. When closing down the range, Orchard Range Patrol will ask you to verify that all personnel and equipment have been accounted for. Excuse me. Contact Orchard Range Patrol and request a cold status. Confirm that all weapon systems have been cleared by the RSO. Acknowledge that there's no accidents or incidents. That's to include POL spills. And if there are any, send that information to Orchard Range Patrol. We will ask you to verify that all range fires have been extinguished. And we will ask you to confirm there are no UXOs or other reports. And if so, give us a location and marking method. When you close down the range, you must send in your IDARM 350-R, which is your range management input worksheet. Send that information via landline 208-272-4444 at the conclusion of the event or between 2300 and 2400. The 350 Romeo must be complete every day within a 24-hour period. This is the range management input worksheet. You'll have block 1, your date, facilities, number of personnel. Block 2 is your wheeled vehicle information by type. Give us by type. If it is a 1151 or a 1078, give us the quantity. Block 3, tracked vehicle, type and quantity. Block 4, type and quantity of aircraft. Block 5, the dodix and ammunition expended. Block 6, your training description of that event. And Block 7, let us know about the vault toilets and dumpsters so we can report that to DOL and have those taken care of if need be. Clearing and departing the range or facility. Notify Orchard Range Patrol a minimum of 4 hours prior to final inspection of the training area or ranges. Drag and police all ranges and or training areas being utilized. Ensure all targetry brought to the range is removed. Clean, but do not sweep all range buildings that have been used. Units will continue to monitor 46950 until departure from the OCTC. Ensure final IDARM Form 350R has been submitted to Orchard Range Patrol. Orchard Range Patrol personnel will inspect all ranges and training areas using a IDARM Form 133R, which will be signed by Orchard Range Patrol personnel and required to turn in equipment to RFM, Range Facility Management. Here we have the 350R. We have all of your inspected items, range tower policed, to trash, your hazmat, downrange sweep completed, checked all firing pits of debris, as for down the list. In Class 3, units will initiate action to contain spills and report the spill immediately to Orchard Range Patrol. All military vehicles will employ jerk pans during maintenance and refueling procedures. All bulk fueling vehicles will employ the green pads or portable spill containment systems beneath the vehicles at all times. The green pads are stationed all around the ranges. Please use those if you are bulk fueling. Spill cleanup is a unit responsibility regardless of the size. Units will be charged to do the cleanup and spills exceed their capabilities. Call Orchard Range Patrol, report it to us, and we will help you get in touch with the right personnel to clean up larger spills. Class 5. Requirements to draw or transport. Class 5. Must have 2 10-pound BC fire extinguishers per vehicle. Excuse me. All movements, Category 1 and 2, AA and E, required armored guards regardless of FEPCON level. must provide deadly force certification to the SOC supervisor. Tarps and securing straps cover all live ammunition. DoD placards on vehicles according to class of ammunition being transported. Personnel operating vehicles qualified to operate that vehicle. Ammunition must be secured and placed in authorized areas. All personnel transporting ammunition, explosives, and pyrotechnics must have completed the hazardous material transportation course and carry that certificate on their body at all times. Continue. Regulations to be followed are IDR 350-12, which is Chapter 7, ATP 4-35-1, Techniques for Munition Handlers, which is in Chapter 6, and your DAPAM 385-64, which is your Ammunition and Explosive Safety Standards. 2 ammunition guards, 2 10-pound BC fire extinguishers will be at each ammo pad. Tarps will be used to cover the ammunition. No ammunition will be stored directly on the ground. You must have no less than 4 inches of ventilation from the ground to the base of the stack. No less than 2 inches of ventilation from the top of the stack to the tarp. No smoking signs must be posted at all ammunition storage locations. Ammunition or explosive storage locations must be approved by Orchard Range Patrol. This request must be submitted no later than 90 days prior to the start date of that activity. Ammunition will be segregated based on chemical content, range, fragmentation, and hazards of an explosion. Ammunition records will be available on site for the inspection by Orchard Range Patrol personnel. Unit commanders are responsible for reporting malfunctions directly to the ammunition officer and Orchard Range Control. If you have a misfire, you will go into immediate check fire status. Report all misfires and weapon malfunctions unable to be cleared by performing immediate action to Orchard Range Patrol. UXOs. Leave all UXOs untouched. Report any duds to Orchard Range Patrol immediately. Report observed or lost indirect fire to Orchard Range Patrol immediately as well. Units will report the firing data for the loss of unobserved rounds. Reported rounds observed striking the impact area but failed to detonate will be reported. Found outside the impact area, mark the area and immediately report it to Orchard Range Patrol if any UXO found with the following information: type and size of the UXO, the possible DOTIC. Give us as much information as possible. Give us a location by grid coordinate, name, rank, and unit of individual reporting that found UXO. Okay, here's a quick reference card we're going to go over real quick. This will go over what I've already mentioned. Range references, required documentation on ranges, whether it's digital or hard copy. Hard copy preferred unless you have access to digital. IDARM 350-12, AR 385-63, DA 385-64. Communications. Establish communications with Orchard Range Patrol by 46950, which is channel 10 in the towers. Class 5 ammunition. This is a minimum requirement, and AHA, Ammo Handling Area, has more requirements. Tracking documentation. 2 10-pound BC fire extinguishers at ammo pad. Tarps to cover ammunition. No smoking signs posted 50 feet from ammunition. Store all ammunition at the Class 5 storage space that is provided or on the approved site. Medical. OIC will ensure the following: qualified medic, dedicated vehicle with FM comms, medical kit, 1 litter, 2 blankets, and 2 straps. Identify a location approved LZ in the event of an air medevac. OIC RSO. Ensure RSO gives safety brief to all personnel before day and night firing operations. The RSO also must ensure that he goes downrange sweep and does it for the maximum range of the weapon system being used. Requesting a hot status. Going from a cold or occupied status, send this information in this order. The OIC RSO's last name and last four of his social. Weapon system to be fired, scenarios and tables. Ammunition dodics. Verify the downrange sweep has been complete. Range flag is flying or red beacon at night. And that there's a medic on site with a litter-bearing vehicle with FM comms. Going into a cold status. We will ask you to acknowledge all weapons have been cleared and are safe by the RSO. And if there's any accidents or incidents to report, we'll ask you to verify that all range fires have been put out. And if any UXOs, to report them. And then ask it for your 350 Romeo information to close out the range. Briefly here, I'm going to go over airspace. This pertains to UAS operations and other fixed wing and rotary wing aircraft. Force Combat Training Center's restricted airspace is ran through range control operations. Airspace designator is Romeo 3203. You'll see TCS 4 sections of airspace. Alpha airspace is surface to flight level 150. That's MSL, mean sea level. Bravo, flight level 150 to 220. Charlie is surface to 6,000 feet MSL. Delta is surface to flight level 220 MSL. And Class G exclusion is surface to 1,200 AGL. That's above ground level. Our rotary wing aircraft will call prior to entering the restricted airspace and will notify us upon departure. Firing desk operation will give a status and occupation upon entry of all ranges and training areas. All helicopters must stay below 1,000 feet AGL and will stay outside of range road unless authorized by range control. UAV and UAS operations take place out of range 03 and outside of Hydra Airfield. Prior to launch and recovery of aircraft, UAV and UAS units must give a 30, a 10, and a 5-minute notification, and the fire desk will activate either ROS Echo or ROS Hydra. All UAS operations outside of range road will be above 2,500 AGL. Inside of range road, it is unit's responsibility to get a schedule of hot ranges to ensure the aircraft is above maximum firing altitudes of all ranges. Use of Delta airspace must be coordinated through the RIFMIS scheduler. This is our Class G surface airspace. Airspace ROS Echo, which is at range 03. And I do not have one for ROS Hydra, but we will add that to the brief. Any questions at this time?